Good day. I would like to have my warm welcome to all beloved speakers, those who have attended for upcoming online webinar on SexQuest 2020. Indian Medical Association HQ New Delhi, Initiative for Sexual Health IISH, is proudly associated with Enliven Archive and Gnome Publications, and we are presenting webinar on SexQuest 2020. I would like to pass this particular session to Professor Deepak Chumani, who is moderator and concluding for this particular webinar. And meanwhile, if attendees are having any queries, you can just post your queries in the chat option, or you can also make use of your raise hand option so that I'll make you available to ask the questions. Thank you. I would like to have my warm welcome for all the attendees and also all the speakers on behalf of Enliven Archive and Gnome Publications. Professor Jumani, I'm handing over the session to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pawan. It's been a great delight for me to welcome all of you for this beautiful webinar. In fact, today, besides Corona pandemic, it's a pandemic of webinars also. But anyway, I'm very, very happy and honored to have the presence of my mentor, my teacher, Dr. Narayan Reddy, of course, Dr. Thareja, Dr. Sanjay, Dr. T.N. Reddy, and the others who will be joining us. This is purely a webinar to educate everyone on certain very common principles and issues which we have in day-to-day life. I was very delighted that Dr. Rajan Sharma, who is the national president of Indian Medical Association, is trying to log in. But moment he comes in, before he comes in, we would like to just start with some presentation of Dr. T.N. Reddy or Dr. Sanjay Kalra, who is the president of Endocrine Society of India, and he is going to speak to us on endocrinology of sex. He has to attend another meeting. Even the IMA is having a very soon. But I would request Dr. Sanjay Kala to start his talk, and he's going to speak to us on endocrinology of sex. He's a wonderful endocrinologist of our country, a humble human being. Let us welcome Dr. Sanjay. Listen to him on what is the endocrine aspect of sexual function. Over to you, Sanjay.
Sorry to interrupt. Please, everyone mute your sessions. So the one speaker who will be speaking will not have any echo to the attendees also. Thank you. Please, the other speakers mute your session.
அந்த மெயில்ல ஃபர்ஸ்ட் இது வந்திருந்தது இல்லையா?
Dr. Karla, we cannot hear you. And Dr. Thareja, please mute your session.
Sanjay, we cannot hear you.
Still, we cannot hear Dr. Sanjay Karla. Dr. Balasubramaniam, please mute your session.
Hello.
Dr. Sanjay Karla, sorry, we cannot hear you.
गेट बंद कर दे अंदर हो जाएगी.
Dr. Thareja and Dr. Balasubramaniam, please mute your sessions so that we cannot hear the resound. Yeah, thank you, Thareja.
Mute.
Mute.
Dr. Balasubramaniam, please
Yeah,
mute your
mute.
session. We can hear the
I'm
sound.
muting.
Yeah. Dr. Carla, please check your voice because we cannot hear you. Please check whether you have inserted the headphones correctly so that.
Can you hear me now, Pavan?
Yes, yes,
Can you hear me now, Pavan?
yes,
Okay,
yes. You're
I've logged
audible
in
now.
through a different. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. I've logged in through a different.
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
okay.
Please, other speakers mute so that we cannot hear the resound.
Clear. Good day, friends, and apologies for the technical glitch.
Dr. Balasubramaniam, please mute. We are hearing the sound.
Let's talk today about the endocrinology of sex. This is a very important topic. Many of us sometimes feel that this topic should not be discussed in open or it should be discussed behind curtains. However, the endocrinology of sex is something that is integral to life. Pavan, I am getting an echo myself. Is there
Yes,
any way of
Dr. Balasubramaniam has not muted the session. So because of that, we can hear the echo.
It's okay, it'll just reinforce the message that I have to give. When we talk of sexuality, we talk of structure, function, and relationship. This is the power of three. When we study the science of sexuality, we talk of anatomy, physiology, and sociology. And endocrine and metabolic function affect all these three domains of sexuality: anatomy, physiology, and sociology. The power of three continues because even though Masters and Johnson described the sexual response in four phases, a later version proposed by Kaplan et al. Supported a triphasic model of sexual response. What Helen Kaplan said was that sexual desire precedes excitement and orgasm. These are the three phases of sexuality, of the sexual response. Sexual desire is psychological. If this is not in place or if it's not healthy, you cannot move on to the physiological planes of excitement and orgasm. These three phases of sexuality or the sexual response are easy to understand if we understand endocrinology in terms of driving forces, facilitating forces, and permitting forces. Let me try to simplify my subject, endocrinology, in terms of sexuality. When we talk of sexual health, we will speak of the endocrine system, the autonomic nervous system, and the vasculometabolic system. All these three are related to endocrinology. Number one, we have hormones which act directly upon sexuality. We call them nature's perfumes. Endorphins, pheromones, oxytocin, dopamine, all these are the perfumes of nature which influence sexuality. The autonomic nervous system is also driven by hormones. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are hormones. So that's why they come under the domain of endocrinology. And the vasculometabolic system is part of endocrinology too. When you have endothelial dysfunction, when you have diabetes, when you have metabolic derangements in the kidney or in the macrovasculature, all these two are part of endocrinology and metabolism. Going on with the power of three, let's discuss our first phase of sexuality, which is desire. Desire is mediated by the sensory nervous system. It will be either vision or touch, or maybe olfaction, or even hearing or taste, or a combination of all these which will stimulate desire. The message for desire goes through the autonomic nervous system, and then the endocrine system comes into play. People tend to think of desire in terms only of sexuality. But if you look at the word libido and see how the dictionary defines it, libido is defined as the energy of the sexual drive as a component of the life instinct. So there's much more to libido than just sexuality. It's just about it includes the way of life, the style of life that you have. So a person who is very energetic can be called as being libidous or hyperlibidous. It will not necessarily mean that that person's libido is limited to sexuality. Continuing with desire, there are three yeah there are three aspects of endocrinology which are important in desire. Number one is the neuroendocrine system. Number two, the gonadal system. And number three, oxytocin or the posterior pituitary. So in the neuroendocrine system, dopamine actually stimulates the mesolimbic pathway. It gives a feeling of reward, a feeling of happiness, and it is this happiness which perpetuates desire. Serotonin, on the other hand, suppresses the mesolimbic pathway. Testosterone is the main driver for desire. In men, there is a very clear hypothalamo pituitary testicular axis, so it is easy to study. In women, we do have testosterone. It is produced by the ovaries and by the adrenals. But there is no clear cut sensor, there's no clear cut master control gland, and there's no clear cut feedway pathway also for testosterone in women. However, it has been seen that if there's a pituitary pathology, an ovarian pathology, or even an adrenal pathology like Addison's disease, testosterone production does come down in women. The third hormone we have to talk about when we talk of desire is oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is known as the hormone of monogamy. Monogamous males, monogamous animal species males also have high levels of oxytocin. So they will have more desire for their partner. But there are conflicting reports. And if you have low levels of high levels of oxytocin, it is not necessary that desire may be more. High levels of oxytocin may actually be associated with reduced desire. This is what we see in women, for example, who are breastfeeding their children. So there are conflicting reports related to oxytocin. But to summarize in a nutshell, we are talking of the first phase of sexuality. We are talking of the endocrinology of the first phase of the sexual response. So trust and fidelity will be fueled by oxytocin. It's the hormone of love, the hormone of monogamy. Desire is fueled by testosterone. This is the driver of libido, of sexual desire, of power. Desire will be reduced by prolactin. It is permitted by thyroid hormones. So if you have a thyroid imbalance, maybe hypothyroidism or severe hyperthyroidism, it is possible that desire may come down. And desire and reward will be mediated by dopamine. From desire, we move on to the second phase, which is arousal and erection. Now, this is predominantly an autonomic phenomenon. The parasympathetic system comes into play, and this stimulates the vascular system to change its endothelial function. Here also, it's a hormone which is at play. This hormone is the only gaseous hormone in the body. It's nitric oxide. So because of parasympathetic stimulation, the vascular system changes its tone. The cavernosal smooth muscles and the cavernosal blood vessels change their tone, and you have more blood entering the cavernosa. In men, you also have vascular congestion in the clitoris in women. So the same arousal, the same erection occurs through the same parasympathetic system in both men and women. Estrogen has a role to play here in women. There is no central impact of estrogen. Of course, estrogen does influence central nervous system health. Estrogen is thought to be a mechanism of preventing Alzheimer's disease. But when you talk of the sexual response, it's a more local influence that estrogen has. It increases local lubrication, increases the vascular flow, and improves the peripheral sensation at the clitoris. And thereby, it helps in facilitating arousal and erection. So, to summarize, the endocrinology of arousal and erection is fueled by nitric oxide, facilitated by testosterone and estrogen, and permitted by vascular metabolic health and thyroid health. Now, see the difference here. Desire was predominantly fueled by testosterone in both men and women. There is an impact of testosterone and arousal and erection, but it is much less even in men. So, testosterone is primarily for desire. Nitric oxide is primarily for arousal and erection. Vasopressin is another posterior pituitary hormone which has been studied. It does not cause arousal, neither does it cause aggression, but it is associated with arousal in men, and it is associated with aggression in women. And this aggression can it will be subclinical aggression, but it will be manifested by a clinical reduction in sexual activity. From desire, we had moved on to arousal, and now let's go on to orgasm, which is the third part of the sexual phase, response, or the sexual phases. Orgasm is mediated by sudden changes in the vascular tone, so endothelial function is important, and also by the autonomic nervous system. The parasympathetic system is pro-erectile. The sympathetic system is pro-ejaculatory. So you have a drop in parasympathetic and you have an increase in sympathetic tone. How does this manifest? An increase in heart rate, for example. Dopamine also comes into the play because it is dopamine which mediates the feeling of reward and happiness. And it does this in conjunction with various other neuropeptides, including beta endorphin. So to summarize the endocrinology of orgasm, it's fueled by oxytocin, but the contentment is facilitated by dopamine. We may have painful disorders or disorders of pain associated with sex, especially in women. These are usually due to a peripheral neuropathy or a central neuropathy. That is how you will have pain because it's a neurological dysfunction, or they may be psychological as well. Diabetic painful neuropathy can actually present as pain during sex in women, and osteopenia can also present as lack of lubrication, which can lead to contact infection or local infection. So these are the endocrine conditions we should be aware of: diabetes and osteopenia or menopause when we talk to women who complain of pain. We've discussed the endocrinology of sex now. We've discussed the physiology. And like we said, we should remember the physiology, the anatomy, and also sociology. We talked of oxytocin as mediating interpersonal relationships. But what is the clinical relevance that we have? As physicians, as surgeons, as medical care professionals, what should we take home regarding endocrinology? So first of all, we should remember the definition of sexual dysfunction. This is a dysfunction which is characterized by personal distress or interpersonal difficulty. These relationships are modulated by oxytocin. A husband-wife relationship or a spouse relationship or two partners, it's oxytocin which mediates a relationship between you and your loved one. So if there's a disturbance here, then obviously there may be sexual dysfunction. the feeling of happiness is achieved through endorphins and dopamine. And if there is a dysfunction at the level of the mesolimbic system, then again, you may have distress. With aging, you will find that androgens come down, but there is something known as the andro accelerator hypothesis. And what this states is that external stimuli, both asexual and sexual, can arouse androgen production. They can stimulate the hypothalamo pituitary testicular axis, and they can reset this axis at a higher level. The clinical relevance is that you do not always need to use hormones to increase androgen production. You can use non-hormonal stimuli. These non-hormonal stimuli can be sexual, like pornography, but they can also be asexual, like giving a feeling of power or giving a feeling of success. We should also be aware of the commonly used drugs that can alter testosterone levels. Anti-androgens, cimetidine, even continuously high doses of rabiprazole, pantoprazole, these are also known to reduce testosterone.
ஒரு iPad இருக்கும் பாரு, blue color.
GnRH analogs, antihypertensives, especially beta blockers, reduce testosterone.
உள்ளுக்குள்ள
There is
blue
one
pad.
study from East Asia which shows that glimepiride increases testosterone. But that does not mean that you prescribe glimepiride to everybody with low testosterone. However, if you have been giving your diabetic patient, male patient, a separate class of glucose lowering drugs, and you feel there's a slight issue with testosterone, you might want to shift to glimepiride. Oral contraceptives, when given to men, increase sex hormone binding globulin and reduce bioavailable testosterone. So it is thought that OCUs may reduce sexuality or sexual desire. On the other hand, taking OCs eliminates the fear of pregnancy, and that might increase sexual desire in women. So in general, in women, you will not find a clinically significant impact of OCUs on desire or testosterone level. However, in transgender women, in trans feminine women, persons, people who are taking oral contraceptives, who are biologically male but they feel that they are female, in these people, when they take oral contraceptives, suddenly their libido goes down. We should also be aware of the investigations that we have to do. We talked of the power of 3. So the power of 3 lies in investigations as well. Number 1, testosterone with LH-FSH. Number 2, prolactin. And number 3, TSH with or without T3, T4 if needed. We should also be aware of the diabetic status and the vascular status of our patients, because diabetes, hypertension, CVD, and end-stage renal disease, these are the commonest causes of sexual dysfunction. My final slide would be 3 take-home messages from an endocrinologist. Number 1, we should be aware of hormonal health. But measure health before hormones. Everybody with a high testosterone will not necessarily be sexually active or sexually proficient. So it is the sexual health which is more important than hormonal levels. It is possible that somebody has high serum testosterone, yet there is gonadal resistance. This term is just meant to explain to you. In men, obesity will be associated with a form of gonadal resistance. The testosterone may be high, but it will not act. Desire will be low. In women, polycystic ovary syndrome will be associated with serum testosterone levels that are higher, but that does not necessarily mean that sexual desire is more. And hypogonadism, you will have many people who have low serum testosterone, but they're sexually competent and proficient. So my first take home message is measure health before hormones. Measure hormones only if they are clinically indicated. In thyroid, we go out of the way to screen for TSH, but not so in andropause. In andropause, you will check serum testosterone only if the patient has come to you with symptoms, not otherwise. My second take home message is do not view hormones in isolation. View them as part of vasculometabolic medicine. So remember to look for diabetes, be glucovigilant, manage diabetes well. Remember to check the blood pressure, be vasculovigilant, and make sure that blood pressure is normal with safe drugs. Also look for macrovascular and microvascular disease, and if required, correct the coronary artery disease, correct the renal disease. My third take home point is related to mind body medicine or holistic medicine. Do not view hormones in isolation. Measure health before hormones. Do not view hormones in isolation. Remember vascular and metabolic health as well. And most important, remember the mind, and remember social relationships. So you cannot manage sexuality if you do not manage the psychosociology of the patient and also of his or her partner or spouse. So you have to manage the partnership as a unit, and you have to manage both their mind and body. If we are able to do this with the help of endocrine investigations and with the help of endocrine drugs, then life becomes much easier for us and for our patients as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay, for that beautiful description of how hormones influence the every phase of sexual response, be it desire, be it arousal, be it ejaculation, and how the whole thing is. It was amazing. It was a beautiful presentation. Thank you very much. Because of paucity of time, we will not take any questions, and I know you have to attend another meeting. So now let us switch on to another interesting talk on unconsummated marriages, which will be delivered by Dr. T. N. Reddy. T. N. Reddy is our National Vice President of Indian Medical Association, a very positive thinker and humble human being. He has a keen interest in the sexual health, and he's very, very positive in motivating everyone to start on these particular aspects of medicines. I invite Dr. T. N. Reddy to start his presentation on unconsummated marriages. Over to you, Dr. Reddy.
Thank you, Dr. Jumani. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure and honor to be with you all. And can you see my slides, please? I'm sharing the screen, and Pawan, can you see that?
No, we cannot see your slides now.
Can
Please
you see
share
now?
entire screen. No,
That's
it's
what
not. Yeah, now.
Okay.
Yeah, now open your presentation. You can drag that icon apart if you are having any disturbance. You can drag that icon.
I'll do it once again. Can you see now?
Yeah, I can see your screen. Please open your presentation. You can drag that white color window apart if it is disturbing you to open your presentation. You can just
Yeah.
click on that white part of that. Yeah. Now I can see your folder open.
Okay.
All set. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much once again, and it is one of the general topics where not much of medical technology or medical science is involved. So I'm starting with this unconsummated marriages, and well, an unconsummated marriage is defined as the failure to perform the sexual intercourse at the beginning of marriage. That means the couple, they never had the sexual relationship when they are married, and sometimes the sexual intercourse may happen after some time, or it may take some years, or it may never happen. So when it never happens, we call it unconsummated marriage. So unconsummated marriage has different consequences. That is personally the guilt, a sense of shame, the incompetency, some reduced self-esteem, aggression in behavior, frustration, and infertility issues, instability in the marriages, and finally it leads to divorce. But when we look into the entire scenario, it should be considered multidimensionally. That is, it is different in physical, mental, social, and cultural factors are very effective in occurrence of these disorders. And the new item that is being used nowadays is called honeymoon impotence or the wedding night impotence, which is referred to the first night or the first few nights after the wedding. So when we look into the entire scenario here, the uncontrolled marriages are mainly due to vaginismus or it's a premature ejaculation in men. So if you look at the Indian scenario, in India, most individuals have no knowledge or inadequate knowledge about sex, particularly females, because usually females think it is very painful. And many individuals are unable to have sex in the first night, and that's the only way we can get information is they get it from the net. But a lot of sexual information comes from unreliable pornographic sites, which often end up confusing the couple and even more. Some also may have a very negative thought about sex and they imagine about it because in the early teaching with the family or the religion, and they also fail to understand that sex is the integral part of the marriage, hence may not indulge in or not allow the partners to proceed. And moreover, today we see a lot of women, they're working women, and they also have such a self-esteem, and the identity in virginity can have a very tough time. And for them, taking a new role as a married woman is a new identity as a sexual being is very difficult for them to accept it. Particularly in conservative and middle-class societies in India and other developing countries, there are also a very religious bond or the strong that rule or the cultural taboos that for the sexual experiences before the wedding. And even in Western countries like US, is still very prevalent. What is vaginismus? It is an involuntary vaginal muscle spasm in women, which makes vaginal penetration impossible because it's one of the most common causes. It is one of the common sexual disorder among women and also the main reason for This reaction is not only limited to just sexual intercourse, and even when the patient goes to a gynecologist, while the examination also they feel the same pain and the problem. Moreover, even in the sexual abuse is also associated with post-traumatic disorder, which also leads to So the experience also vary in different people, particularly if you look at women. Women reacts to sexual activity by vaginismus. One is hasty intercourse at the wedding night and its painful experience, unaware of the anatomy and performance of women's reproductive organs, and unaware of different methods of sexual activity. These ignorances also vary. When it comes to men, erectile dysfunction is a major cause. It is a leading cause of It has got a psychogenic origin and is also maybe primary or secondary to vaginismus. It is also believed that the female sexual dysfunction could be considered as the primus movement in couple with sexual dysfunction. As a result, repeated failures in penetration, the man often develops ED, which can perpetuate even after the treatment of vaginism in the females has been treated. Then you have the sexual phobias. Male and female sex phobic personality traits could have an important role in developing several sexual dysfunctions, including Now, phobia can be or become a specific sexual phobia regarding fear of pain during penetration, making intercourse impossible. Then the psychology. Psychology in UM. UM can have a differential effects of psych on individual partners. It can lead to low self-esteem in individuals. There's always a blame game and always a frequent fight among the partners. Then you have the extramarital affairs. Then you have fights within the family or with both the families of husband and wife. And in India, not able to conceive or give birth to a child leads to frustration and depression among the couples. And it is also a taboo where many individuals will not come forward to seek the help of a sexologist due to lack of awareness and taboo. It may lead finally to the dissolution of marriage and the divorce. So what are the sexual manners? Sexual manners is a reaction to one biology motivation that is important for elevating generations, and also it is effective on satisfaction of a married life. And usually the sexual problems have a very unpleasant effect on the people's mind. And vaginismus is one of the prevalent and the most common sexual problem that is consistent of contraction involved muscles in 1/3 of the external vagina that prevents to entering male genital organs and sexual relationship. And women often see these diseases in upper educational, economical, and social situations, where sometimes the reason of the disease is a sexual trauma like molestation and strict religious following. Clinical experience of sexualists on patients who are affected by vaginismus and anxiety as seen in upper prevalent people who are affected by sexual problems. Panic attacks and failure of non-sexual relationship, or woman who is suffering from avoidable sexual relationship after trauma, molestation can be sign of anxiety and the disease. These disorders that are related to disease are curable with different drugs and methods, as a earlier speaker has said. And it's also true, while continuing with these disorders leads to UM, lack of satisfaction couples in the married life, and disordering in relation between individuals and even divorce. So when we look at the entire the main reason is vaginismus, which is tops the list. And according to history of men and women who had previous fear, it can be said that they are in exposure to more than others. And different methods of mental cure and consulting can be used for curing this disorder, regarding mentioning history about mental reasons of vaginismus that can lead to So, concluding, discussion about sexual matter is not acceptable culturally in India. Sexual disorders are often the cause, the interruption in family, and main reasons for divorce. Lack of attention to the disorder causing enduring in this problem. And it can be concluded that disorder by psychological and non-drug treatment with correct and timely training before marriage is very curable. This is very important, and it also will prevent the marriages from falling apart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. T.N. Reddy, for that wonderful description and presentation. In fact, it's a very, very common problem. I had just one query before you sign off. Is unconsummated marriage can be one of the deciding factor for giving a divorce to a partner?
No, actually, even most of the courts, when they go to the court gives them the opportunity to come out with a solution where the marriage can be worked out. And if it can be treated medically, they give option of medical treatment. If there's an option to do a psychological therapy, even that has been used. But usually, the courts, they encourage them to stay together till they give some time, because we have seen couple getting childbirth after 22 years. I mean, they have consummated only after 22 years. So this is the time also they have taken, they have been documented. So definitely they had to be given a chance. If everything fails, then they can go for a divorce.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And we move on to the next talk, which is by my teacher, my mentor. In fact, Dr. Narayan Reddy, who is the President Emeritus Chairman of our Council of Sex Education and Parenthood International, also heading the AOFS in India, in the Southeast Asia. We look upon him as the father of sexology. He is the pioneer in starting sexual medicine in the hospitals across Chennai, and it's really pleasure to hear him. Friends, welcome him, and he's going to tell us about some principles of what is needed in sexual health. Welcome, Dr. Narayan Reddy, and please start your talk.
Thank you, Professor Deepak. My thanks to all of you for giving me an opportunity to be with you this Sunday afternoon. Now you have heard two great lectures. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Narayan Reddy.
Yeah.
Pawan, can you check? We cannot hear, sir.
It's audible. It's audible to us.
Shall I continue to speak or wait?
Let me get confirmation from Dr. Jumanji. I mean, Professor Jumani. Professor Jumani, can you hear Dr. Narayan Reddy?
I cannot hear him.
Dr. Narayan Reddy, please go ahead. I guess he can hear you now.
Okay.
Now, Jumani?
Yes, I can hear him.
Yeah, please go ahead, Dr. Narayan Reddy.
We had two erudite lectures on the biology of sex and failure to have an intercourse. Now we move on to what is known as sexual health. People use the word sexual health in a very general terms. But according to definition by WHO, sexual health is a status in which there is physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being. That means it is not just medical, it goes beyond medical. I tell you why all of them are very important. Now, you have not only heard about hormones, you also talked about trust and fidelity. They're very important to understand. Now, suppose if a man has got erectile dysfunction and a good andrologist operates upon him and puts a penile prosthesis inside, the man can have sex without fail. But does it give pleasure to the woman, make her happy? So the state is related to relationship to sexuality. It should be associated with pleasurable and safe sexual experiences. Underlying the word pleasurable, WHO in 2002 included the word pleasurable or pleasure in the definition. That's where it goes. People know that what is one person's food, it may not necessarily be the other person's food, but poison. What turns a man on may not turn a woman on. The man is sexually aroused by physical stimuli because in evolutionary biology, this is how the male species has been made. All that they have to do is to plant the seed for perpetuation of the species. As the woman's arousal is not dependent on the visual stimuli, but on cognitive stimuli. That means at the level of thoughts, at the level of feelings. So that is why emotions play a great role in the act of sexual intercourse.
I could see.
Most of us, the medical doctors, we fail to understand this. We only think in terms of medicine, pharmacotherapy, and surgery. And some of them may treat them for psychiatric problems. We don't think in terms of the emotionality. It's very important. And today, sociology also got a very great role to play because the human behavior, especially sexual behavior, is conditioned by socio-cultural mores. I am sure that you understand that if a good sexual health has to be obtained, we should look at sexual health and sexuality with respect and kindness. That is very important. Only when you can show respect, equal respect, then the woman, the other partner can be happy. Without that, nothing is going to happen. Even though this is a medical seminar, I would like to draw your attention to the recently released Hindi movie called Tappad, where the heroine, all that she wants was respect and happiness. So your money is given, sexual intercourse is happening, but it's not going to give her happiness. If there is no happiness, how can there be sexual health?
इससे नेक्स्ट मेरा है.
Can you hear me or not? Hello?
We can hear you.
Yes,
we can hear you.
sir.
Hi, you are audible, sir.
Dr. Balasubramaniam and Dr. Bharti Karla, please mute your sessions. Thank you. You can go ahead, Dr. Narayan Reddy.
So we have to focus not just on the physicality and not just on the mind, but on feelings and emotions. That's very important. That's why we said if we don't look at a client's complaint or a problem holistically, which Dr. Sanjay Kalla very clearly said, holistic medicine is very important, then you are not going to do justice. Pleasure for whom? For both the partners. So in principle, we have to address this issue as a couple rather than as an individual client. Most of us, we do not do that. We see the male patient, we take his complaint, we assume that we put him on PD5 inhibitor or a surgery or whatever it is, and then we have done our job. But are we really checking that the couple ultimately are happy or not? Unless the woman is really happy, the man also cannot be happy. That's the point which we are missing. Now, very, very clearly for that purpose, for sexual health to be implemented, the World Association for Sexual Health has given a declaration of sexual rights. There are 16 mentioned important sexual rights. Why should we think in terms of a right? Because rights gives us accessibility and availability. Without that, nothing can be done. Now, one of the most important principles of sexual health is knowledge. Most sexual problems are due to ignorance, fear, and guilt. Those two stem from ignorance. So to drive away the ignorance, we have to give them knowledge. And that knowledge comes in the form of sexuality education. Now, sexuality education can be given only by trained staff or trained people who are both comfortable with their own sexuality and subject of sexuality. Without that, knowing about medicine, knowing about the surgery is not going to help anybody. Comfort is very, very important. I am very happy the Indian Medical Association is trying to give this knowledge and empower people, medical people, to pass on this knowledge and empowerment to the general public. Now, to put it in simple terms, I'll quote my senior colleague, Professor Dr. Mahender Chand Vatsa, founder of Council of Sex Education Parenthood International. He used to say, for a good sexual health, he used to say 4T recipe or 4T therapy. The T stands for the English alphabet T, QRST. At the top of that, you have touch, the physicality. If that has to be good, the second T is important, which is the trust. Why is that trust is very important? As we mentioned earlier, the woman is not aroused by visual stimuli. She can be aroused only by cognitive stimuli. She must have the confidence that this man will stick to me, stand by me, and take care of me and the offspring. Biologically, in evolutionary wise, evolutionary biology made sure that this happens in human beings. Otherwise, there will be no children which is going to be living long. So, unless the man is able to build trust in a woman, the woman cannot really get aroused. Forget about your endocrinology, medicine, physiology, etc. She has to develop a trust in the man. How will trust happen? For that, they need to talk to each other, communicate. Like somebody wonderfully said, define sex as the most intimate form of interpersonal non-verbal communication. So ultimately the communication which tells the other person the depth of their love, attachment, affection to the other person. To sit together and talk to each other and make each other comfortable, you require quality time. So the last T is the time. So we must all allot equal time. What is happening in medical practice, as I observed in my 38 years of exclusive sexology practice, most of us do not bother about improving the communication skills of the couple. It's very important, along with your pharmacotherapy, surgical treatment, or psychiatric thing, unless we improve the communication skills between the two partners, there is nothing going to be achieved. It's only like operation successful, patient died. So it's very important. In a country like India, I can also add two more T's. One is a cup of tea when you talk, and a cup of tea to continue or contain our population. So in principle, sexual health cannot be achieved without attention to emotional and social needs. Why social needs are important? Our behavior are conditioned by social cultural norms. Today, every day in paper, we read about rape, molestation, harassment at workplace, domestic violence, etc., etc. Why? Because society is at fault. Society is not telling people that to be happy, you also must respect the other person's feelings. Like in a movie, Amitabh Bachchan's statement in the movie Pink, no means no. How many men can understand? They take it is their right to impose themselves on their wives, and thereby they result in marital rape, which is not talked about. What is talked about is rape done perpetuated by strangers, like the Nirbhaya case or whatever it is. But more number of marital rapes are taking place in India and other countries, which we are not talking about. So, societally also, we have to think about a change in the mindset of the male population. And in my opinion, this can be achieved only by the mothers. Today being a Mother's Day, My humble request to all the mothers, please make sure that you treat both your boys and girls, both your children, equally. Do not give entitlement for the male side. The day we can do that and instill that they should treat their female siblings and other women with respect, I am sure other things will be easy to follow and that can be achieved. So my take home message is be holistic, look at sexuality from all aspects. Only then you can really be creating a pleasurable and happy society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful insight. I must appreciate the 4T of Dr. Vatsa are good, but your 2T are much, much better than that. Thank you very much. I'll conclude my session, and in my session, in the end, I'm going to tell you how best your session was. Now, let me switch over to another talk by Dr.
ಅದಕ್ಕೆ
Thareja.
ನಂಬರ್ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Dr. Thareja is the president of IMA
नहीं अभी
Rajasthan
डॉक्टर
chapter,
सरेजा की है
a senior sexologist, and also has been a very important post in the CSEPI, the Council of Sex Education. He's going to tell us now. We have learnt about the hormones, about the biology, about how the marriages are not getting consummated, and also the principles of sexual health. Now, let us understand how to become a good sexologist. To tell us all about how to become a good sexologist, please invite our dear friend Dr. M.L. Thareja, who is a practicing sexologist from Alwar, Rajasthan, and also the president of Rajasthan IMA chapter. Over to you, Dr. Thareja. Please start your presentation.
Welcome. I'm thankful to the.
Professor Jumani, who is the next speaker?
I'm thankful to Dr. Deepak Jumani ji, who has invited me on this, giving me the chance. This is how I feel in my practical life, how to become successful sexologist. Everybody wants to become a successful sexologist, just like Dr. Vatsa, Dr. Narayan Reddy, Dr. Prakash Kothari, Dr. Raj Brahmbhatt, and Dr. Deepak Jumani. But it will take its own time. Success of the story, everybody wants to rise and rise in his life. Target. We should have a target that we should be a successful sexologist. Gold standard is help to grow for the practice. Word of mouth, from one mouth to other mouth, for one person to other person, we can have this power. If we satisfied one patient, that will reaches to the 4th patient. If you disappoint one patient, that will reaches to the 10 potential patient. So you lose the practice. Just to improve your practice, you have to satisfy your patients by all means. We should not do any type of practice which is not permissible by our regulatory body. And nowadays, so many practitioners are there. That is allopathic, homeopathic, Ayurvedic, and electropathic. Am I audible or not? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
There are so many pathies are there now in the sexology, that is allopathic, homeopathic, Ayurvedic, electropathic. But we should do only the pathy which is recognized by us. That is according to the rule number 1.13. No person other than a doctor having a qualification recognized by a Medical Council of India and registered with the Medical Council of India or State Medical Council is allowed to practice modern medicine, modern system of medicine or surgery. A person obtaining a qualification in any other system of medicine is not allowed to practice modern medicine.
Thareja, your audio is not very clear.
Now what is the condition of audio? Is it better? Hello? Now the audio is little bit better. Hello. Now the audio.
Yes.
Now the audio.
Now it is better.
Now it is
Now
better. Successful doctor. For a successful doctor, that is comes A, B, C. A means availability, B means behavior, and third comes the competency. One should be available at the particular time. He should be very punctual. He should be very well dressed, like Dr. Giovanni used to be always in the very well dressed. And behavior should be polite, and competency comes at the last. That needs 40% of the patients. Our services should be presentable to the patients. जो देखता है वो बिकता है. Whatever is seen in outside the showroom, in a showroom in the window case, that will sell. What is lying inside the showroom will not be able to sell. So we have to project ourselves in so many medias. Just we have to be present in so many banners is there, in IMA banners, private practitioner banner, dermatologists, cardiologists, gynecologists, physicians, psychiatrists, and nursing home general practitioner, diabetologists. Because we have to do regular CMEs with those. They are our most, they are the doctors or the specialists who are referring the patient to us. We should be always be present in their CMEs as a speaker. We should be present in our school education program, so from the rural to urban, college, club, Mahila Mandal, slum area, and NGO. We should be present everywhere and giving the lecture so that our presence will be there in their areas. Invitations from the school. We should do the regular sex education in different schools. I've taken a lecture in Alwar in a school. There is roughly 2,000 students who are there. That is from 8th standard to 12th standard. We have to do adolescent sex education. In this adolescent sex education, we will keep things in the mind. We'll ask the student to raise the question. No student will raise the question. We have to put the drop box. So the students put the questions in their drop box, and that is to be replied, and they don't want to come in front of their teachers. We should do a small group discussion in the corporate house so that we will be visible in businessmen, in pensioner, teachers, trade union, advocates. Among the pensioner, you have got a genetic problems and elderly sexual problems. Against the advocate and trade unions and businessmen, they have got a stress problem. So you have to face them separately and educate them. The nursing staff, you have to educate your nursing staff of your government hospital as well as the private hospitals, so that you are visible everywhere. You have to do the conferences for local level or the state level. You should be present in the media, print media or the electronic media on every day, doctors related. These are the few doctors related days. You should be present everywhere. This is my personal opinion. After that, you will be visible in so many places and you will increase your practice, and one day you will become a successful sexologist. And now the change is the only thing which is constant. We have to, these are the old methods. Now these are the newer methods we have to adopt. That is, you should be present on Google, Just Dial, Labrate, Facebook, login, website, Instagram, Twitter, and now the latest is telemedicine, which is available in case of the coronavirus, and the other things are there. Complete history taking is a must. We have to take the complete personal history, that is all the personal habits, medical history. Just Dr. Reddy has given in short and also the sexual history. This differ from the age, gender, marital status, history of any child sex abuse, education, exposed to pornography and social economical use of recreation drug, restricted upbringing, just like Dr. Reddy has told, any post experience and this first sexual experience. Complete history taking and the physical examination is a must. The physical examination of the male is a must, and the physical examination of the female should be done either with the presence of the husband or with the female attendant. Now there is a such much more difficult time for the Consumer Product Act. We should be very careful while examining the female patient. Counseling and pharmacotherapy skill. This is confidently, privacy, comfort, and quiet. Some basic principles. Counseling is centered on the difficulties of the client. Counseling is learning situation which eventually result as a behavior change. Effectiveness of counseling depends upon the reading of the client to make changes and the therapeutic relation with the counselor. Counseling ये मनीष ही चला termination of the session. There is no great secret to ending the session. Start and the end on time. You should be punctual about the time. Leaves 5 minutes or so as a summary on the session. Introduce the end of the session normally. Assign homework. Just as a unconsummated marriage and so many things, we have to assign the homework to the patient. Set up for the next appointment. The training of the reception and related staff. First, to interact with the patient. He and she should be polite. Positive attitudes towards the patient. Take message properly and accurately. Resolution of the complaint. Remove all the public areas if it is local, and acknowledge that one, and empathize the patients. Promise for the action and undertake the action. Report back to the administration. We should use the best possible which are only available at a selected counter.
Your audio is not clear, Thareja.
Yes, even then now I am not audible. Hello, Dr. Juhani, now I am audible. Hello, देखना. Hello, 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 hello.
We can't see your slides. Yeah, we can hear you, but we can't see your slides. We can see you.
Dr. Tareja, please
We can
check
see
your
your
audio
slides, but we
connection.
cannot hear you,
It's very disturbing. No, still your audio is not corrected. We cannot see your slides and your audio is not clear, Dr. Tareja. Now the slides are fine, but the audio is not clear. Yes,
Hello?
now it's good.
Am I audible?
Yes, now we can hear you.
We should use the best possible drugs and not any local made drugs which are only available at the selective counters. Most of our colleagues are doing the mistakes. They are doing some mistakes. Just see, there is this is the prescription of some doctor who is giving tadalafil BD with sildenafil BD, and it should not be given. And I have seen these are the doctors who are giving clomiphene citrate 3 times a day. Otherwise, it is not the dose. So we have to educate our doctors regarding the dose and all things. And this is
Dr. Thareja, we have lost you.
Am I audible?
You are audible, but slides are not seen.
No, slides is over, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Thareja, for that wonderful description of how actually to be a good doctor, which is very important. Of course, for sexologists, you need a lot of training, you need a lot of other things. But you have explained us so beautifully as to what are the general qualities of a doctor and how he should behave with his patients, which goes in a long way. And thank you very much for that wonderful description of how to be a good doctor and a good sexologist. You also explained how wrong prescriptions and how wrong drugs have been given. Yes, we need, that's what education is the key. Thank you very much. We move on to the next speaker. We have a very interesting talk on female infertility by Dr. Bharti Kalra, who's from Karnal, a senior gynecologist, a wonderful human being
आवाज में
who
कुछ
has a
चक्कर है।
finesse and a very good
अगर अपन
clinical
इस पे बोलते हैं
acumen,
तो आवाज
very ethical doctor, always wants to learn something new or the other, a very busy
नहीं
gynecologist. Friends, put your hands together and welcome Dr. Bharti Kalra, who's going to tell us about female infertility. Over to you, Dr. Bharti.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Thareja, can you remove your screen, please?
yes हटा मनीष हटाना yeah just 1 minute just 1 minute
Thank you. Yeah, Bharti, we can see you now. Let's
No,
see your presentation.
yes, sir.
Share your screen.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you.
And, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the female factors in infertility. This session is otherwise very good because we have come to know so many of psychological aspects of dealing with the fertility issue. And I am dealing about the medical part of it in the female factors in infertility. So first to discuss about what is fertility. It's the natural capability to produce offsprings. It depends upon nutrition. That means if you get healthy nutrition, then there are chances that a couple will be fertile. The women who are undernourished or who are obese, they are less fertile as compared to with the normal BMI woman. And it depends upon the sexual behavior, as we have seen in the previous lectures. And about the cultural issues, in some cultures, the early phase of marriage, the couple is not allowed to stay together, or if they have their in-laws or senior couple in the family staying with them, it's just like once they go to their bedroom, only then the young newly married couple is allowed to go to their rooms. So this happens frequently, at least in our area we have seen it. And about the endocrine and anatomic health, if these are well maintained, the chances is that the couple is fertile. And now discussing about the infertility or subfertility. Am I audible? Hello? This is the couple's inability to conceive even after 1 year of unprotected regular intercourse, which is in the peri-ovulatory phase.
Bharti, can you come closer to the mic,
Infertility
please?
can be. My, hello. Am I audible now?
ये वाला अच्छा
Hello?
हाँ छोड़ दूँ इसको ऑडियो का
Infertility
बंद कर
can
दें।
be primary, in which the woman is conceived even after 1 year of intercourse, and it can be secondary. Secondary means once the conception has occurred, it might have terminated in abortion, or she has delivered one baby, or she had only a history of miscarriages, or maybe in ectopic pregnancy. So the overall incidence of infertility is between the 5 to 15%. That means roughly 80 to 85% of women conceive within 1 year of their marriage, and only 5 to 15% are left. Of these, 5 to 10% may conceive in their next year of the sexual activity. So discussing about the causes of infertility, I have classified it like AEIOU. That's an easy way to remember. That A stands for anatomical causes, means we have to rule out anatomical defects that may be related to uterus, ovaries, tubes, cervix, or vagina, or maybe autoimmune causes could be there. That may be autoimmune diabetes, thyroiditis, SLE, etc. And there can be E for endocrine causes, just like in diabetes, thyroid, hyperprolactinemia. And very important E is for education. That in the previous lecture we have come to know that education is not, the couple is not educated about the sexual activity. That's why most commonly we have seen the couple suffering from the problem of infertility. And I is for infective causes, that may be chlamydia, gonorrhea, or ureaplasma infection, or maybe tuberculosis of their genital tract. It can be iatrogenic. Frequently, unmarried girls come with the PCOS and they are given hormonal regulators in their unmarried time. And it's very important to inform them about the contraceptive effect of hormonal pills. So sometimes we have seen the girls, they continue these hormonal pills even after their marriage, and they come with a problem of infertility, and that is to be looked for. And others are the O is for the obvious causes. Obvious may be if there is absent vagina, transvaginal septum, or absent or hypoplastic uterus. These are the obvious reasons in which the woman will remain infertile.
Bharti, we can't
Or-
hear you.
They can't hear me. Sir, I just try to connect it again. So now, is it okay? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
Hello?
Yeah,
Am
we
I-
can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So, first is the anatomical causes. There are anatomical defects are there. Autoimmune, endocrine, lack of education, infective causes, iatrogenic causes, and obvious causes in which there is a transverse vaginal septum, or absent vagina, or hypoplastic uterus, absent uterus. And O stand for other. That may be the occupational hazards may be there. The woman is working as a in the clinic as a radiologist, or she is having X-ray. She is working as an X-ray technician, so she has radiation exposure, or maybe she is working at some other some factory where there is exposure to some hazards like there, and so there are U is for the uncontrolled medical or surgical illnesses. If she has previous history of any abdominal surgery, she may be having infertility because of her tubal adhesions. And if all the causes have been ruled out, then there lies the category of. She is working as an X-ray technician, so she has radiation exposure.
Dr. Jumani, please mute your session so that we'll not have this sound.
And the unexplained causes. Once we have ruled out all other clinical conditions and we are unable to fit the diagnosis into any of the category, then it is the unexplained. So we have to take the history. First, we start with the female patient. We take about the family history. There are chances that there is family history of infertility in women. Means the family history of PCOS may be there, or her mother had given birth late after marriage, or in the couple's family, sometimes it is the male factor infertility in which the husband's brothers are also that those couples are also infertile. And in history, we must ask about the lifestyle. If there is lack of exercise and the rich food intake is there, that means the BMI is more, or the physical activity is very less. So that we have to ask in their history so that we can tell them to improve their lifestyle. We have to take the history of some medical illness or any history of sexually transmitted diseases in the past, and a history of any endocrine disorders, maybe if she is already suffering from thyroid or hyperprolactinemia or PCOS, and there is any history of surgery in her childhood or later on before her marriage, which she might not have told to her in-laws, and she may confide in you. In the history, we must ask about the menstrual history. When she had attained menarche, are her cycles regular? She is getting cyclicity is regular, or she is having any history of menorrhagia or dysmenorrhea. And in secondary infertility, it's very important to ask about their previous obstetric history and which type of contraceptive practices she was earlier using. Maybe she had got the copper T inserted long back and she just forgot, and now she is planning to conceive but she is unable to do so. Or is there any history of use of smoking or alcohol intake or any other drug abuse is there? And moreover, and most important, we have to take their sexual history, a history about their coital frequency, whether they are in regular sexual relationship. Most important is around the periovulatory phase. And next, coming to their examination, that as we do in all our patients, the general physical examination. In this, very important part is the examination of breast. To rule out any lump in the breast, if incidentally we may find some breast lump and it may have, she may be carrying some carcinoma in breast, or there is galactoria. So galactoria indicative of high prolactin levels. So that may be having an anovulatory cycles.
Sorry to interrupt. Please mute your sessions other than speaker so that we'll not have resound.
Go
Thank
after breast examination, must do pelvic examination. Of this, a per speculum examination to inspect her, must inspect her vulva, vagina, and cervical health, whether there is any cervical polyp, cervical erosion, or evidence of chronic cervicitis or vaginal discharge is there, and then do her per vaginum examination to look for any position of uterus, whether it is retroverted, anteverted, whether it is mobile, its movement is tender, or is there any adnexal mass. And in examination, the commonly used is the TVS. Few of gynecologists here just omit the PS and PV and they just go on to TVS. So because say, according to them, transvaginal ultrasonography is the third eye of gynecologist. We agree with this statement, but even then we shouldn't miss PS and PV examination, especially in patients of infertility. And this is the checklist when we go for further investigation. We should look for any pituitary problem. That means we should check for her prolactin levels, any rule out any thyroid disorder, any goiter is there, ask her history about it, history of diabetes, or we have to investigate for diabetes at present also, especially if she is obese. And look for her ovaries, adrenals. Don't miss if she has hirsutism or acne, but testing about the testosterone levels. Then the other, these are the reproductive parts, and the lower reproductive part, which includes the vulva, vagina, uterus, tubes, and ovaries. So we have to make checklist so that we shouldn't miss any of these organs. So about investigations, that is a basic hygiene. They should know about it. That is the consummation of marriage. We have already discussed about it. The effect of non-consummation of marriage and how to counsel them, how to go about it, and education about the fertile period. We are very happy to know that in 9th and 10th standard, the science book, they have the chapter on fertility. That means the fertility and the reproductive organs. So even even in the 8th standard, the basic fertility as well as the reproductive system is taught to the students. So now the people are coming with awareness about their genital tract, their menstrual cycles, and fertile period. So earlier we used to get patients who are totally unaware of this thing. Even the girls were medical, those who were not in the medical students from the other branches, they were not aware of whether they are getting normal vaginal discharge or what is the mid cycle and what is the safe period. So now these things are taught in the 10th standard also. So then we have to investigate about the anatomical causes. The ultrasound is very helpful for this, for detecting the uterine health, and if there is any ovarian mass or some pelvic mass is there, for the diagnosis of endometriosis. And if we want to know about the tubal health, we should go for the HSG, that is hysterosalpingography, or ultrasound is helpful in that way also by doing the sonosalpingography. If we don't get any conclusive evidence or diagnostic evidence that what can be the cause of infertility, then we should proceed to the laparoscopy and hysteroscopy as needed. So now this is the gold standard to find out, to rule out any unexplained infertility, because in most of the cases we get some evidence which suggests that in laparoscopy and hysteroscopy, which suggests that there is a reason for infertility. And when we have to assess about the functional activity, that we should do by the hormonal profile. If we have to look for from the blood test, we have to look for whether ovulation is there or not. So on D21 progesterone levels, if it is more than 25, that is suggestive of ovulation. And if for the baseline scan, we should go for if cycles are irregular, so we must do LH, FSH, TSH, prolactin, serum E2 levels, and AMH. So AMH is very important in diagnosis of polycystic ovary diseases and to rule out premature ovarian failure, and to see the ovarian reserve if the woman is of age, if her age is more than 30. If she is around 35 and she is very much keen to conceive, so we should assess her status so that we shouldn't waste time in general taking care of her general health or just postponing her advanced fertility treatment. If the accessibility to ultrasound is there with the woman, she can go for the follicular study to look for the features of ovulation. If it is not available, she can do home kits ovulation, or she can use home diagnostic kits for ovulation known as LH search kits in mid cycle. That is just like the pregnancy strips. They do the first morning urine sample, and if there are two lines, that is suggestive of that there is LH search, and they should plan intercourse during 48 hours. Coming 48 hours, there are chances that she may conceive. And for the intervention, the counseling is the most important part. Approximately 50% of couples, women conceive with the advice and simple treatment. That is, counseling is like making them aware about their anatomy, educate and ensure basic hygiene, reassure them, just alleviate their fears about the infertility, and reassurance is very helpful. That will boost up their confidence. And sometimes we have to arrange their cycles. Sometimes the male partner is posted outside their city, and there is, we call it as a visiting husband. If they have visiting husband and their timings are not matching with the mid cycle, then we can arrange either their cycle or we can plan their husband's visits according to their mid cycle. And we should control the risk factors. The second C is controlling of risk factors. That is, if BMI is more or very less, we guide them to improve it with diet and exercise. They should avoid smoking and alcohol use. And very important is compassionate listening. That is the psychosocial support. So in our practice, I just call the female first of all alone. We talk to her and we ask about the questions as well as examine her. Then we call her partner. If she has some issues, then we discuss in our own language. We discuss with her partner so that he shouldn't come to know that his wife has told us. And we should cure the condition if it is there, that is the PID and dyspareunia are there. So antibiotics have important role. Sometimes a course of doxycycline and metrogyl given for 2 weeks does the needful. And if we find out that there is ovulatory dysfunction, ovulation induction can be done with the clomiphene, aromatase inhibitors and gonadotropins as per need. And if we give progesterone support, the results are better. And for hormonal disturbance, we have to treat it. Thyroid is the thyroid testing is the first in our checklist, that we have to check it, the baseline the TSH levels. If these are high, if patient is taking treatment for fertility, if TSH is more than 2.5, we try to bring it to 2.5. The chances of fertility are better. Treat hyperprolactinemia and polycystic ovaries and manage their occupational hazards. So if medical treatment fails or the diagnosis is that we need surgical treatment for anatomical pathologies, that means if for uterus, if we have to treat for fibroids, polyp, we have to do septal resection or Asherman syndrome. In ovaries, if endometrioma is there, if tubal block is there, adhesions are present. So in that case, we need operative laparoscopy and hysteroscopy to do the needful. And in PS examination, if we find cervical polyp, we have to remove it. If erosion is there, we have to treat it. And cervicitis is also treated by antibiotics. If all medical management fails and we find the factors in which the routine measures can't work, then we take the help of ART, that is assisted reproductive techniques. In this, the first and commonest one is the artificial insemination. So IUI, that is the intrauterine insemination. But in some patients of non-consummation of marriage, we can try IVI, that is the intravaginal insemination. We have done in our practice in so many couples with the successful results, in which maybe because of vaginismus or the performance anxiety in the male partner, we were able to teach them to do IVI and they were successful. So IUI is to be done. The indications for IUI are if there is male factor infertility or unexplained infertility, mild endometriosis, combined male and ovulatory infertility, in which we all ovulation induction and progesterone support, cycle regulation, everything is done and it's not effective. Even after 3 months, we are not successful, then we suggest them to go for IUI. And if there is immunological infertility, if we have detected by PCT, that is a post-coital test, in which if we find there are immotile sperms are there and otherwise the male partner sperm report is okay, then we should go for IUI, or we can suggest them to use barrier for 3 months and then plan pregnancy. Or if there is sexual dysfunction leading to infertility, that is also IUI will be effective. For male factors, donor insemination can be done with or without stimulation with FSH. And if IUI also doesn't work or tubal block is there, dense adhesions are present in pelvis, then we should suggest them to go for in vitro fertilization, that is the IVF procedures. That can be done with the donor eggs, or if it's very difficult to get women's eggs, or if she is a case of premature ovarian failure, and or if she is of elderly age group more than 35 years of age, in which there is poor egg quality or her AMH level is very low. So the common causes in practice what we see, that is a lack of knowledge, obesity, thyroid dysfunction, polycystic ovaries syndrome, endometriosis, and above all is the fear of social stigma, which leads to performance anxiety in the couple. Because if in some areas, if the woman doesn't conceive even after 1 month of her marriage, the couple visits the hospital for the infertility treatment. So the psychological support counseling is very important part to treat this fear of social stigma. And prognosis is otherwise good because roughly 90 to 95% couple get success for with their infertility treatment. But if there is increased age of women, prolonged duration of infertility, and primary infertility, their prognosis is poor, and sometimes the 4% women may remain sterile, and we have to suggest them adoption. And even then we have to tell them the positive side of adoption, that they will be mother, there will be someone to call them mama. So that is the uh, to bring smile on their faces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bharti, for that wonderful talk. It was
Thank you, sir.
very lucid, very explanatory. Let's move on to the last talk by Dr. M. Bala Subramaniam, who's going to speak to us on male infertility. Dr. Bala is very well known to us. He is the past national uh, vice president of of IMA headquarters, a very humble human being, worked with the government of Tamil Nadu, a very, very interesting person who has a keen passion to teach and learn. Friends, put your hands together and welcome Dr. Bala Subramaniam, who's going to tell us about male infertility. Over to you, Bala.
Thank you very much, Dr. Deepak Dumani. At the outset, let me thank Indian Medical Association and its newly started wing initiative for sexual health. Dear friends, we have assembled in India, where the entire India, along with other countries, many other countries are on Corona lockdown. And in a way, the couples are locked inside the house 24/7, and they are unable to come out except for genuine emergency reasons. And WHO expects 2 crores babies to be born in the quarter of September, October, November 2020. This may give joy to so many families, but there will be agony and worry will linger in about 15% of newly married couples for inability to conceive. Infertility is defined as the inability to conceive within 12 months of marriage in spite of regular intercourse without use of any birth control measures. Average incidence of infertility is 15% globally. And many causes can be detected and treated. That is why the infertility clinics are there in many of the metro cities and district headquarters. In about 40% childless couples, the husband is responsible for infertility. It is not the women alone. It is the husband who has to responsible for 40%. He is responsible for deciding the newborn, whether to be male or female. And in the same way, he is responsible for 40% of the infertility. So hence, both partners have to be evaluated in all infertile couples. Never ignore a husband in treating an infertility case. For a male to be fertile, there has to be normal spermatogenesis. That is, sperm should be produced healthily. And there should be normal duct system, because sperm is produced in the testes and it has to come out through the penis. So there should be a normal ductal system should be there. And the ability to transmit the sperm into the vagina. The third component is transmitting the sperm into the vagina. And fourth one, the most important, is sexual intercourse during
Sorry to interrupt.
ovulation.
Dr. Tareja, please mute your session so that we'll not have resound. Thank you.
Sexual intercourse has to be during ovulation or at periodic intervals of 2 to 3 days. The main causes of male infertility are conditions that affect the quality or quantity of the sperm may lead to infertility. And these conditions include varicocele, primary testicular failure, accessory gland infection, and idiopathic low sperm motility. Seminal analysis is the main tool in evaluating male infertility, and the semen has to be collected after abstinence of 3 to 5 days. It should not be within 1 or 2 days. It will interfere with the count, seminal count. And it should not be more than 7 days or 10 days. It will interfere with motility. So if you want to have good, accurate data of count as well as motility, the abstinence should be ideal 3 to 5 days. If the sample of semen is collected at home, the bottle should not be washed with soap and should be completely dry. It should reach the lab in 1 hour. The bottle can be kept in the shirt pocket or pant pocket, and content should not be spilled or exposed to sunlight. If the test is to be repeated, it should be done only after 4 to 6 weeks. It should not be repeated the very next week. The method of semen analysis, we had old conventional manual method, which are being now replaced with computer-aided sperm analysis. In computer-aided sperm analysis, we have 2 techniques. One is the open one and the other one is closed. Open one is better because we can have accurate data or various details of the sperm. And another advantage is we can have the main lab in one place, and we can have collection satellite center anywhere in India where the patient gives the sample of the semen, it is collected, stained, photographed, and sent to the main lab, which with the software in the main lab, they can give the accurate reports. This not only saves the time, but also on the investment. Now, let us analyze the normal semen analysis. The various parameters are the semen volume. It is 1.5 ml or more. And pH 7.2 or more. Sperm count 15 million per ml or 39 million per ejaculate. Next one is the morphology. At least 4% or more with normal morphology. The count is minimum 15 million and morphology should at least 4% of this. Motility should be 32% or more with rapid linear progressive motility. This is the most important one, rapid linear progressive motility. Any semen analysis should give this report accurately. Or it can be 40% or more with inclusion of forward progressive motility. And another component which is often forgotten is the vitality. The number of active live sperms. It should be 58 or more. Many of the seminal analyses do not give this vitality, which is at most significant. And we should remember about anti-sperm antibodies also. The semen may be produced in the male, but it may be destroyed because the immunology system remembers the semen or spermatozoa as a foreign body. For this to happen, the sperm has to come in touch with blood. Only when it comes in touch with the blood, the antibodies will be formed. This happens in prostatic infections or any prostatic surgery. So, the male sperms may be produced, but because of anti-sperm antibodies, these sperms may be destroyed in the male. Same way, these anti-sperm antibodies can be formed in the female also. The female has cervicitis or any other problem, the semen comes in contact with the blood, then sperm antibodies will be formed. Not only from the blood, from the cervical secretions also, these anti-sperm antibodies will be formed, and sperm may be deposited into the vagina, but the female secretes anti-sperm antibodies and these sperms are destroyed. So we will come to the management. This is the most secret of success of any practitioners. After going through the various components of the semen analysis, we have to decide whether this person has oligospermia, whether the sperms are reduced in number. This reduction can be due to varicocele, and surgery is indicated. This is totally correctable condition. If a urologist or surgeon does this varicocele surgery, the semen production can be restored normally. This varicocele interferes with the temperature of the scrotum or the testes, and so the spermatogenesis is disturbed. So once the varicocele surgery is done, the spermatogenesis becomes normal. The second commonest condition is infection, and mainly chlamydia infections are there. So for this, we have to give doxycycline 100 milligram OD for 2 weeks. If the anti-sperm antibodies are there, which can be estimated in the blood or semen sample, we have to give immunosuppressant or like tablet prednisolone. If it happens in the female, anti-sperm antibodies are formed in the female, the husband should use condom for 3 months, and IUA will be a better option so that the lady can conceive. Small testes and hormonal imbalance are outside the purview of the general practitioners or thing, and they should be referred to endocrinologists. If along with the reduction, if there is astenospermia, that is weak sperms where the motility is less, we have to treat the infection if it is present. If there are pus cells in the seminal analysis, it indicates there is infection, and we have to treat the infection. And we have to give antioxidants like lycopene, L-carnitine, coenzyme Q, like that for minimum of 3 months. Even after 3 months, we have to repeat the semen analysis. If it does not improve, we can recommend the couple for IVF or IUA also. Azoospermia, absence of sperms in the semen analysis. We have to rule out retrograde ejaculation. The sperms may be produced, it may be ejaculated through vas deferens, it may reach the urethra, but it may reach the urethra, but instead of coming out through the penis, it may go into the bladder. So next sample of urine, when it is passed, will wash out all these sperms. So we have to rule out retrograde ejaculation. If it is retrograde ejaculation is not there, we have to advise testicular biopsy to prove there is spermatogenesis. Or if spermatogenesis is there, it indicates tubal block. So surgery for tubal block should be resorted. Nowadays, there cannot be any infertile couple. It is only the question of time or the service which they go and consult. The assisted reproductive technology, which has come as a new branch of medicine itself or a sub-branch of gynecology and obstetrics, it has revolutionized. Many of the infertile couples are able to have children. Even women after menopause are able to have children by newer techniques. So in oligospermia, astenospermia, teratospermia, and autoimmunity can be successfully treated by assisted reproductive technology. The success of treatment depends upon the duration of infertility. Therefore, the couple should seek the help immediately after 1 year of fertility. They should wait for first wedding anniversary. If the wife does not become pregnant, it is better they consult the family physician first or a sexologist and then go for the specialist, various other specialists. And the actual number of sperms is not so important for prognosis of IVF. If the sperm count is less than 15 million, you need not discourage the husband or the couple. You can tell them IVF is possible, success is possible. In able hands, the success rate of assisted reproductive technology has gone up to 30 to 50%. So in some of the immunology centers, it has gone to 60 to 70% also. So there is a scope for every couple. no couple in this world cannot be infertile anymore. There are techniques right from simple advice to assisted reproductive technology. We can render our service to these people, and these couple will not forget the doctor who has given the correct guidance. And there should not be any unethical activity in the rendering the service to these infertile couples. It has to be only ethical, ethical, ethical. And thank you for all the opportunity. I thank Deepak Jubani for the wonderful opportunity he has given. A lot of hiccups were there. Somehow I was able to come onto the screen and deliver my talk. Thank you very much. Thanks you one and all.
Thank you, Bala, for that wonderful talk. You gave a beautiful insight on male infertility. We are just coming to the end of our webinar. I would like to conclude by saying Dr. Sanjay Kalra in the beginning gave us a beautiful insight on how hormones form the basis of sexual response, which is the desire, and how at every stage the hormones play a good role. Then Dr. T. N. Reddy gave us an insight on why marriages don't get consummated, which is a big problem today. There have been increased number of divorces because of unconsummation of marriages. And that was a beautiful insight as to describing as to what are the reasons. And then I had my teacher, my mentor, Dr. Narayan Reddy, who beautifully explained to us the whole perspective of sexual health. His, in short, to tell was, sex is not peno-vaginal intercourse only. It is much more, much beyond that. It involves so many factors. It is a holistic act. So it was a very beautiful thing to understand from him that it is not just a peno-vaginal act. It is a holistic approach to a very important aspect of human relationships. Then we had Dr. Thareja, who beautifully, with his experience, told us how to be a good doctor and a good sexologist. Then we had Dr. Bharti, who explained to us the nuances of what are the factors responsible for infertility in females and how do we manage them. And in the end, we had our dear Dr. Bala, who beautifully told us about male infertility and how male infertility can be tackled. In fact, it was a beautiful movie on how sex is important, how in infertility, how sexual act and what every nuances of this are important all about. I thank Dr. Sanjay Kalra, I thank Dr. Narayan Reddy, T. Reddy. I also thank Dr. Bala and Dr. Bharti and Dr. Thareja for being here, for sharing their wisdom so profusely in this such short notice. And I beseech them to bless me, and we look forward to future more understandings on the sexual aspects under the banner of Indian my medical association's initiative for sexual health. I'm sorry Dr. Rajan Sharma could not attend because he had to attend another important meeting of all the presidents and secretaries. He's asked for an apology for that. But anyway, his blessings are always there with us. And I thank everyone once again from the bottom of my heart, especially Dr. Reddy, Dr. Bala, and Dr. Kalra, and Dr. Thareja. Thank you very much. We call this webinar to an end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Adding to the points of Professor Deepak Jubani,
Thank you, Pawan. Thank you, Pawan, for the whole arrangement. There were some glitches, but yes, it was overall it was good. Thank you, Pawan, for everything.
Yeah. Thanks a lot on behalf of Enliven Archive and Gnome Publications to organize an associated webinar on Sex Quest with Indian Medical Association. And that was very insightful talk to many of the attendees. I would like to thank all the speakers who have all the way came to present their very insightful presentations to the attendees. And I also want to thank all the attendants who have took their time to take a participation in this particular webinar. And I would like to mention the contributions of Enliven Archive and Gnome Publications to the open access industry. And I request all the professors and doctors to continue the collaboration with Enliven Archive and Gnome Publications for your upcoming submissions. And we are also planning for a virtual conference very soon, and we hope for the huge association and collaboration from all eminent personalities and dignitaries like you. And I would like to take the privilege of thanking and extending my gratefulness to all the speakers and all the arrangements that have been taken. And a special thanks to Professor Deepak Chumani to have this happen today. The great applause to Professor
Thank you
Deepak
very much.
Chumani from all of us. Yeah,
Thank you, Pawan. Thank you, all
thanks
of
a
you.
lot.
Let's call
Yeah,
it a day.
thanks
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Yeah, I'll just end the session right now. Yeah.